Welcome back to the latest episode of Across the Bifrost. My name's Sun Tzu, and joining me, as always, is my dear co-host from across the pond, Pat Dunford. And today, we're going to be recapping the more popular characters in the online league, TTS Season 7 for Marvel Crisis Protocol. But first, let's check in with Pat. Pat, how you doing?
I'm doing very well, thank you, TT. How are you?
I'm great. Thanks for asking. Um, yeah, it's been a good week. We launched our YouTube channel. You should be able to check it out at youtube.com/across the Bifrost. We'd appreciate any subscribes. We're also giving away a Juggernaut there. We'll ship a Juggernaut to wherever you are in the world. All you have to do is be part of the Discord, subscribe to the YouTube, and make a comment. You can join the Discord at acrossthebifrost.com/discord. All the information is there. So let's just jump on into it, Pat. We've got a lot of stuff to cover. Obviously, the TTS League started, and a card that caught your eye looking through the stats was none other than We Are Groot.
Yeah, We Are Groot is a card that I've been thinking about quite a bit recently as I've been playing some Guardians of the Galaxy, and I thought it would be a fun one to discuss for Sleeve It or Heave It. Partly because I haven't made up my own mind about whether or not it's worth including. And then when I looked through the stats, I saw that the community was also pretty divided. It had an almost exactly 50-50 split between people that took it when they played Groot and people who didn't.
I guess let's recap the card, right? Which is an active card that Groot can use across some 3 power, and Groot and allied characters within range 4 may remove 2 damage. So, first of all, range 4 is gigantic. You could theoretically heal a ton of healing off of this, but I think you have to distill down if I only heal 1 or 2 characters, is it worthwhile?
Mm-hmm.
And the answer is maybe. I don't know. The quote unquote nerf to Groot, where he can only heal himself once per round, does mean he's more likely to want to benefit from the healing of We Are Groot. Where previously he was able to heal himself for 6 if he wanted to, now he can only heal himself for 3 per activation. So there is a slight thing there, but I think Guardian's attrition is a really real list. I don't think we're seeing Groot taking a lot out of Guardians. Guardians inherently lend themselves to going wide. So I like the theoretical of being able to heal a lot of characters there, because you do end up just taking a lot of weird chip tertiary damage on these characters. Characters that should daze out to an attack end up surviving on 1 or 2 hit points. And like we talked about before, they're really wide. So I like the card, but it does kind of fight with what Guardians want to do, right? Which is just, I want to deal as much damage to you as possible.
Exactly. And there's no shortage of cards that let them do that, plus other character specific cards you might want to take that you might think are better for that specific game plan, right? I don't think Guardians in general is taking very many tough characters. Groot and Drax aside, there's a couple there that are worth considering, but the core of the team is so often Nebula, Rocket, and Star-Lord, none of whom are especially resilient, right? In fact, Rocket is one of the most fragile characters. So there's definitely some tension, and working out how valuable is this heal, like you said, it's a little bit difficult to quantify. If you compare it to something like Medpack, it's not as good if it's healing only one character. It's healing for less, and it's costing more power, although it is a longer range. But as soon as you go to more characters, it's a very cost efficient, very effective heal. The thing is, though, not all characters are created equal, and it might be you'd rather heal a character like Black Panther or Thanos for 3 stamina rather than top up some characters who are fragile and are just going to lose that stamina very quickly, even after you've mended them.
Yeah, the comparison to MedPack obviously happens a lot, and I think the other thing we need to point out in the comparison, right, is MedPack has the flexibility to be used on any character's activation, including the character. If I want to heal Groot, right, I can activate Rocket, MedPack Groot up, right? We Are Groot is obviously tied to Groot's activation.
No, I don't believe it is.
What are we talking about?
Unaffiliated
MedPack?
active, Groot can spend 3 power to play this card. Groot and allied
Oh, it
characters
doesn't
in
have to be
4
his
can remove
action. That's a
2.
good. It doesn't have to be his
No.
activation. Oh,
So
that's
it's actually
better.
more flexible, right?
It is
Because
more. Yep.
Medpack, you have to be your activation to play the card. You can play this in any character's activation to get a big heal, which is
See,
really cool.
I was already high in the card, Pat. I like it even more now. I've been playing
Yeah.
this card wrong in my limited Guardians games. Um, but I think what you ends up coming down to it is what cards are you taking and what card are you missing out on, right? Because it ends up where you have to compare the 2 cards together, and one of them doesn't get taken.
Right.
So, in your opinion, what are the 2 BNR cards that Guardians ends up taking?
I think you can make a case for various ones. I personally really like Bitter Rivals with Guardians. I think they're
Hmm.
one of the better Bitter Rivals teams. And they want to play those fighty central crises where Bitter Rivals really shines. So I'm a big fan of that. And then after that, I think you can make a case for field dressing. I think field dressing and Bitter Rivals are my two personal favorites with Guardians. But I wouldn't hold it against you if you took any combination of the restricted cards, right? Medpack, Brace, Patch Up are all good cards. And certainly Medpack and Patch Up overlap with this card, right? With We Are Groot.
See, and I agree with you on the bitter rivals, and then I agree on field dressing. I also rank Brace higher, and the reason being we talked about it. These characters, for the most part, outside of Groot, don't have these large ablative hit point pools. Brace just kind of stopping the damage versus I have to live through the thing to take the heal is one of the reasons that I put the heals a little lower. So that does fight with me liking We Are Groot.
Yeah,
Um,
I think with Brace, it depends a lot on what specific Guardians you intend to take off them. Because Groot and Drax are pretty resilient to collisions, and Rocket's immune to them.
mhm.
Star Lord, in my experience, not always, but a lot of the time can be quite far away. And if your unaffiliated includes are very resilient to collision, then maybe you don't need Brace. I think probably it's there primarily to protect whatever those characters are.
Yeah, I mean, one of the reasons I like Brace is when I'm playing Guardians, at least I end up with this blob and my characters just get thrown into each other a lot, which is why I prioritize Brace and Indomitable pretty highly.
Mhm.
But I do understand your point, right? I love X-23 and Honey Badger in there, and both of them are okay into throws. Um,
It's not great that X-23 is size 3 when you throw her into her buddies.
yeah, 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 but they're okay. But again, I think we kind of agree there. So after we have the two of those, they don't have a great unaffiliated card, but we do like. I think if we're playing Guardians, we want Deadly Duo just because we want volume of attacks out there.
Right, and this is another reason why, for me, We Are Groot gets taken less often, because I really dislike taking multiple character-specific cards for a single character, because of the fact they all cost power to use. And once you start stacking those power requirements on top of each other, it becomes difficult to meet them all. So it's much harder to use We Are Groot when you're also planning to use Deadly Duo. And I really, really like Deadly Duo.
Yeah, and Groot is a character that doesn't generate a ton of power unless you're punching him in the face a lot, right?
Right.
He's got a range 3 uh, power equal to damage done strike.
Hmm. Yeah.
So
And because he can self heal, okay, sometimes stacking those heals will be good, but oftentimes the effect of the card healing himself is less useful than it might be on another character.
yeah, I mean it is less efficient for him to use We Are Groot than Living Plant, right? By a long shot there.
Yeah.
Um, so I still like the card. I think I'd take it if I was anticipating a lot of chip damage, if I think I'm going to be into a lot of beams, or honestly, if I think I'm going to take a lot of gamma damage from gamma, where I know that there's just going to be a lot of damage kind of spread out. Traps is another one maybe I take it on, right? Where I know that there's just going to be some chip damage thrown around.
Yeah.
So I like the card. I would make room for it in my 10 if I was playing Guardians. And then I'd bring it into my 5 situation. Like, what about you, Pat?
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I have it in my 10 in my current Guardians roster, but I'm never bringing it into my 5. And I think I just need to be a little bit more courageous in when I take it. Another crisis that I enjoy with Guardians that you didn't mention, that you've made me realize would probably be really good with this card, is Cosmic Cube Fragments, right? Where I'm spreading damage across my team and I'm powering up Groot with a fragment so he can actually use this more easily.
Yeah, I think that's a great inclusion there too. So I think we're both tentatively sleeving We Are Groot.
Yeah, I'll sleeve
Awesome.
it.
Awesome. I'm excited for that.
Me
So
too.
Jacob over at XavierProtocols.com released his updated season 7 roster stats. We highly encourage you to go check them out there. And we're going to be talking about the top characters, kind of what they do, why they're at the top, and a little bit of how to deal with them. And starting off is no surprise, really, Dr. Voodoo, taking almost 45% of lists, unless you live in Australia. So, Pat, what do we think of Dr. Voodoo?
Yeah, like you said, it's not very surprising that Doctor Voodoo is so popular. He was a character that in the last TTS season was very new, and people already had very high opinions of him, right? Since the start of that season, his stock has gone up and up because a lot of the other really powerful 4 threat characters that people were taking in preference have been nerfed in the November rules update, right? Enchantress and Medusa, really strong multi-purpose 4 threat characters with great controlling abilities. Doctor Voodoo was like third to them, and now with them being reduced, he has ascended. And I don't know if he's actually better than those characters, but I think the mentality of, oh, I'm not going to take a character who's been nerfed also influences that. And it doesn't surprise me that he's now on top.
Yeah. So what role does Doctor Voodoo fill on the battlefield, Pat?
So he's versatile in that he's pretty fast with medium move with a medium base and flight. Um, Pretty good attacks, especially his builder with sap power, and his spender is short range but really powerful with power burn. Um, a useful throw. So, and he's quite tough, right? With 12 total stamina and good defenses, basically 446 defensive stats is really solid, especially against Mystic. So all of that stuff is nice, and it makes him quite a good all rounder. But the reason you're playing him is possession. Possession is the thing he does that no one else does. It's unique and it's really, really powerful.
Yeah, so possession, he spends X power, where X equals the threat value of the enemy character he's targeting within 3. The enemy character drops all objective tokens holding, and then while the character has his brother token on it, it cannot interact, hold, or contest objective tokens, which is obviously huge, right? It's just a hard no. You just can't do it anymore. And I think
Mhm.
I think there's two other reasons I think we see Voodoo a lot. Teams have gotten taller, and being able to say this more expensive, this 5 or 6 threat character can't play in the sprinklers of scenario anymore can be really impactful. And then Voodoo has really, really relevant affiliation tags, right? We have Avengers, Convocation, and Midnight Suns.
Yeah, which are all popular, powerful affiliations in the league and just in general, right? They all see good amounts of play. So he gets taken in those affiliations incredibly frequently. And he's also got a unique effect, which means if you want that effect, you're going to have to take him outside of affiliation too. Um, it's interesting you mentioned you're seeing more tall teams, TT, with fewer characters. I'm actually seeing kind of the opposite. I think a lot of people are going wide. And you know what? I think possession is good there too, because of the fact it scales with threat. Turning off a single valuable character is great, but also like being able to chase down a 2 threat that's running away with the senator or something like that is also really powerful. And one of the things that Voodoo can do if he's got a lot of power is he can put possession on multiple characters in his activation to make them all drop their extracts, leaving it on a character at the end who then won't be able to contest secures. And that kind of play can be a massive swing that can completely deflate your opponent.
Yeah, I do think it's interesting, right? I think the meta in general is wider, but I'm seeing more and more tall teams, right? I see a lot of tall brotherhood, and then criminals ending up being 5 wide, sometimes 6 wide, right? Depending on how expensive they want to fit in the Juggernaut, is what I've seen a lot
Mhm.
locally in the games I'm playing. But yeah, like you said, Voodoo
Yeah.
is a once you give out that token, it's not like he's a leaf in the wind. Like he's a very valid character who's still able to impact the field greatly. Right? Like you said, his defense is dropped to a 2/2/4. He does have that 6
Mhm.
stamina buffer there, but he has a good attack and a relevant throw. Right, a size 2 character throws short is nothing to sneeze at.
Yeah, and he's certainly more fragile when he's giving up his token. But when he's healthy, dazing him doesn't remove the token. So even if he is fragile, sometimes he becomes expendable, and you just accept that okay, he's going to get dazed, but at least I'm going to stop this character from scoring.
Yeah, which can obviously be monstrous, right? If they're going to score the Wakandan herb, you being able to shut down their herb carrier. If they end up picking a high value extract, whether that's a Kree Power Core, the Scroll, the Senator, any of those are the
Mhm.
ones I'm missing. There's obviously just huge value in Voodoo, and a range 3 5 dice Mystic attack with Sap Power is really good at getting him the power he needs for possession.
Yeah, his power generation is great because on top of that, he also generates power whenever he rolls skulls in a dice roll. And
Mhm.
you add all that together, and it just becomes so likely that he's going to make power whatever is happening, right? When he gets attacked, he's going to take some damage. Maybe he'll roll some skulls, he'll get lots of power. When he attacks, maybe he'll get wilds, maybe he'll get skulls, maybe he'll do damage. He has lots of opportunities to get his kit going.
So, do you have any counter tech for Voodoo? A lot of people have asked us on the Discord, what do you do when you're playing into Voodoo? And I'm curious what you do, Pat.
I think there's a couple of things you can do. One of them is even though I mentioned that when he's dazed, he doesn't give up his possession token. I do think that attacking Voodoo is a really solid plan to limit his impact over the course of the game. Because once he's not protected by Brother Daniel, he's very fragile for a full threat character. He becomes a bit of a punching bag, and he's actually quite a good way to generate power, right, for your team. And he's only got 2 defense dice and 6 stamina. Just throw some builders into him. He will go down or have to bring his Brother Daniel back. And even if in the short term that puts you behind on victory points, you do it again the next round, and then you can take Voodoo completely out of the equation. So I do think that he's a character that can be counterplayed just with aggression and pouring as many attack dice into him as possible.
Yeah, I just want to point out too that, and Pat brought it up. Um, Voodoo being dazed does not remove the Brother Daniel token, right? But if the
Mhm.
character the token is on is dazed, right, the token ends up going back to Dr. Voodoo. And I just think that's an important thing to remember. I've seen a couple different people forget that in a couple games I've watched recently. And yeah, I agree with you, Pat. Once you're dazed by Voodoo and you start attacking him, like if Voodoo has a 9 dice Juggernaut attack coming into him, you have to make a decision of can I survive this, or do I need to recall the token so I go back up to my 4 physical defense? And I think those are the kind of situations you need to put Voodoo in. I don't think you can ignore him because I think he's just too strong and impactful in the game. He's going to do good damage. He's going to throw characters and that possession tokens out there.
I completely agree. One of the things that you tend to want to do if you're playing with Voodoo is you tend to want to activate him towards the end of the round so that you can put out possession without suffering the negative repercussions of being more easily attacked, right? But if you are playing a team that isn't trying to control priority and has good damage, so for example, a wide damage focused team like Guardians of the Galaxy, right? Then just attacking Voodoo as much as you can early on can be a really good way to stop him doing what he wants, and force your opponent's hand. And if Voodoo has to activate sooner in the round, then you can attack him while his defenses are down, or you can force him to have potentially a suboptimal activation. And sometimes it's fine if he might do something like have to activate early and possess lizards, and then Lizard's like, okay, I guess I'm just going to attack you. I'll do 2 builders and a throw into your 2 defense, and I might just kill you, even with Lizard's pretty mediocre attack stats. Um, so I just think aggression works well in a lot of different ways against Voodoo.
So how aggressive are you into Voodoo before he tosses that Brother Daniel token out there, Pat?
I will attack him whenever I can because his power generation on his own is so good. I don't feel like giving him more power is much of a penalty. Obviously, there'll be certain game states where that's not true, and you want to look at things and think, is it wise to give Voodoo a couple more power? But generally speaking, I will happily attack him, and he's usually my number one target because of the fact that my long-term game plan for him with any team that does good damage is to KO him.
Yeah, I agree. I've seen a lot of people try to power starve him, and Voodoo's gonna get the power he needs on his own, right? The other thing I'll say is staggers are very relevant. If you can get a
Mhm.
stagger on him, kind of control where he is, um, you can limit his range for Brother Daniel. But like I said, medium move and a medium base plus range 3, he can get pretty far with one action.
Yes, I do think you're right though that there is, if damage isn't your focus, there is some counterplay with controlling his actions because his action economy is not great. Even though his actions are good, he's only got the 2 of them, right? He often can't throw and possess, and if he's only making a single attack action to generate power, even though the dice are stacked in his favor, it's still dicey and it might not do everything he wants, right? It doesn't feel great if your plan with Voodoo is, okay, I'm going to advance, make a single builder, and hope to generate 3 power so I can possess, right? That can go wrong a lot. So I agree with you that staggers, but also throws, just moving him away from your team are a really good way to limit his output and keep him under control if you can't focus damage on him.
Yeah, and a character that's phenomenal at staggering people is actually Black Cat, and she was the second most popular character, kind of regardless of where you're taking in the world. And she's obviously an incredibly powerful 3 threat, a long mover with a place effect. But really, the reason people are taking Black Cat is Master Cat Burglar, which is just choose an enemy character in one and move an asset or civilian token that character's holding to this character. Right? It's the same thing Enchantress did. It's the same thing Enchantress does. It's just on a very fast moving chassis.
Yes. And it's not only is Black Cat very fast, like insanely fast, right? With the long move, the bonus move from Troublemaker and the bonus move from Grappling Hook. But she's also difficult enough to deal with that it's problematic between bad luck and stealth and her speed. It's not that she is hard to kill, it's that it's hard to get good attacks into her, right? You often don't get a lot of attacks with a single activation because she is running away from you and she's stealthy. And then you can't stack the odds in your favor because you can't manipulate dice. So she is great at grabbing objectives, running away, and limiting your retaliation against her.
Yeah, obviously, I mean, the common plays for Black Cat are to go in at the last or second to last activation of a round, steal the token from you, or the Criminal Syndicate one of all according to plan or first activation Black Cat. She runs up and grabs something before you have a chance to interact with her, right?
Yeah.
So, like Pat says, right, stealth making it so you can't attack her from more than 3 away. She has 2 long moves and a 2-inch place to get to you, and then she can steal objectives off you. So be really careful, be really respectful of Black Cat. Um, Especially if it's a high value piece like a legacy virus or something like that. You really have to respect that character out there.
Yes. She really comes into her own in squads that can give her more power generation because with just her claw building power, she can't reliably do effective steals until around turn 3 in terms of having enough power to steal and get very far away. But as soon as you have some synergies with giving her power, she can accelerate that so that her primary game plan is online turn 2 and sometimes even turn 1. So she shines with any of the affiliations that give bonus power, right? The list is long. She shines with cards and characters that give bonus power. And those are often combo pieces that you want to take if you plan to use Black Cat primarily for stealing objectives.
Yeah, and like Pat said, be respectful of can they Black Cat something valuable off me round 1.
Mm-hmm.
Right, Avengers with advanced R&D can do it. A Force can do it if you accidentally didn't give them too much power. Brotherhood can do it, just to name a few off the top of my head. And the last activation, Black Cat, or second to last, if you've already activated a flank out, just running up and stealing your hammer is a pretty big flip. Especially
Yes.
like Pat said, you're only going to get one action to try to get Black Cat, and then she's just gone. Right, she's just double long moving back to some D where she can sit safely, or honestly even back to a corner if the extract is valuable enough. She can definitely be hard to nail down.
Yeah, very, very potent character. Um, it should be mentioned as well that her attack suite is not insignificant because Troublemaker is a really cool and fairly unique effect. This is her spender. It only costs 2 power, and it has a guaranteed stagger. It can't do much damage. It's capped at doing 1 damage, kind of like Shuri. But having automatic stagger is huge, right? And it gives her this second game mode where, if for whatever reason stealing extracts is not an option or not enough to win you the game, you can go into the second plan of I will just stagger 2 characters with my activation. I've used my 3-cost character with their 2 actions to take away 2 actions from my opponent. And if those characters are more valuable, that's a net gain for me. I might even get some moves out of the deal with Elusive and Grappling Hook. And I might end up too far away that they can't even retaliate against me. So I think that line of play is really powerful and actually kind of overlooked just because her Master Cat Burglar gets so much attention, but she's a really great control piece with guaranteed stagger.
Yeah, phenomenal. And honestly, I don't hate Cat Claws either. I like Pierce on builders personally, but Troublemaker, the one thing I want to highlight is its range 3. It pushes her attack range out from range 2 to range 3. You couple that with the elusive move, it can be a lot in a game where maybe the Black Cat team has already secured the valuable secure, right? I should use a different word
Yeah.
there. She is able to switch to a very powerful controlling piece, and still just stand places to control things. So she's a very good piece. I am not surprised to see her this popular.
Yeah, me neither. So, TT, how can we handle her?
Um, a couple different ways. The one thing is, she is susceptible to any kind of power manipulation. She's one of those characters where if I can get a stun or a poison on her, I will kind of go out of my way to
Mm-hmm.
do it. Same with a slow. If I can get a slow on her, I think it's very valuable. And then once she's in there, I will just try to beat the living snot out of her. If she overextends to grab that hammer in the end of round 1, my opening in round 2, I'm gonna try to punish Black Cat. Because if I don't take advantage of her in that situation, I feel like she's just going to scoot away. What about you, Pat?
Yeah, I completely agree. I think you have to try and attack her when you can, if that's your only option to take an extract off her. I think characters who have rerolls, they're disincentivized because of bad luck, but sometimes you've just got to take your medicine, you've got to attack her regardless, right? I've had games where I've been attacking her with Nebula, not getting my rerolls for Assassin, right? Just because she's the character holding the extracts and she still needs to die, right? That's how I'm going to win the game, is I'm going to get her to drop the extracts. So I think bad luck is really powerful, but it shouldn't dissuade you from attacking her when you have the opportunity.
The last thing I want to say, and one of the reasons this character is so popular, is one of the best ways to combat a Black Cat is to have Black Cat. And you just play this super, super, super fun interactive game where we just steal the tokens off each other. It's lots of fun. Everybody loves it.
Yeah, one character that's fast enough to keep up with Black Cat is indeed herself. So yeah, that's the thing. And you know the other character that's really popular, that's really good against Black Cat? It's the one we
Dr.
just talked
Voodoo.
about, right? It's Dr. Voodoo.
She's
Because when
only a
you
3 threat.
she's only 3 threat, and when you possess her, none of her stealing shenanigans work. She can be as fast as she likes. The best she's gonna do is some 4 threat builders and some staggers. And that still matters, but not nearly as much as the victory point swing that she can create when she's able to steal extracts.
Yeah, so that's Dr. Voodoo, that's Black Cat. Those were the only characters taken in the 40 percentile globally. And then we dive into kind of the next group of characters. We have 2 characters in the low 30s and 1 character in the high 20s that I would group together personally. Those
Mhm.
characters in no particular order are Toad, Bullseye, and Lizard. And let's go ahead and start with Toad because he clawed his way to the top of the pile. He leapt right on up there. So, or hopped, excuse me, hopped right on up there. So, Pat, what do we think about Toad?
Yeah, I mean, Toad has been a great character ever since he was released, right? And he is about 15 months old at this point, so he's been played a lot, and his popularity has been going up and up and up. Um, One of the things that is interesting about this TTS season, and this is not the first season where this has been true, is Brotherhood of Mutants a really popular affiliation, incredibly popular. And Toad really ties that affiliation together as an affiliated 2 threat that is just good value. So I think part of the reason that he's ascended to the top 5 is because of his membership in Brotherhood, but that's not the only reason, right? He is fast and he has a really good suite of abilities between um, extract manipulation, incinerate, and even a push effect on his builder.
Yeah, obviously there's been kind of a gaping hole left as Okoye dropped in popularity, and a bunch of different twos have kind of risen to take it. I think the other reason we're going to see Toad a lot is Legacy Virus, right? Toad is kind of
Yeah.
a staple on Legacy Virus. Is one of the easy ways for me to get all these legacies onto a single character, and we've talked about it before. I love Toad. The fact that he has 5 stamina on his healthy side, really relevant, right? Makes him that much harder to daze there. And he's got Slippery, right? We can take that medium advance. And it's important to remember that advance is not directionally challenged. He can advance anywhere. So there's a lot of different power in Toad. And I'm excited to see him on the top of the list. I think you hit on everything, Pat. Like, don't sleep on his wild push. Like, it saved me in more games than I can remember.
Yeah. So, in terms of dealing with Toad, I think there's a couple of things you can do. The most important thing that I think you have to do is you have to be aware of his slippery ability, right? This is his reactive superpower, costs 2 power. After you attack him, if he is damaged, he can use the effect and he gets to advanced medium. He can go in any direction. He's a wall crawler, so he can often go out of line of sight or get cover or go out of range of your next attack. This is his main escape mechanism and it's really strong. But there are ways to combat it. One thing that can be really good is if you can do damage to him without attacking him. So, for example, terrain throws, right? If you can soften him up before you attack him, your attack is more likely to daze him. And if he's dazed, then he's not going to get slippery. Another way is with attacks that generate extra attacks, like rapid fire. The way that slippery and rapid fire interact is you, as the attacker, get your effect before slippery. So you get 2 chances to take out Toad before he gets any chances to escape.
Yeah, all great piece of advice. I honestly don't really have anything to add there. He's just yeah, Toad's a great character. I love him a lot.
Yeah, he's really cool. He is fragile, and he's a 2 threat. So it's not that often that he survives the full game. And if he does, it's because he spent a lot of time running away. But more than any other character in MCP, I don't begrudge Toad if he runs away. It seems like that's his MO, That's his job as part of the team, and he does it really well.
No, and I hate to say it, right? But the two characters we mentioned beforehand are also great ways to deal with him, right? He obviously only costs 2 for possession, and Black Cat is one of the few characters who can keep up with Toad, right? Toad on that double move with the hop at 2 inch place, right? Black Cat's I have double long and a 2 inch place. So both of them are
Yeah.
able to catch up with him and then rip the item off of him without him being able to slippery away.
Yeah, the three of these characters are kind of a trinity. They're all characters that interact with crises in a unique and powerful way, and they're all different threat values, right? You've got the 2 cost version, the 3 cost version, the 4 cost version. They all work really well together and against each other. They collectively are the star players in Legacy Virus, which is the most powerful crisis because of them. So yeah, they are basically the meta right now. I think it's very wise to consider playing some combination of these characters, either to exploit these crises in your favor or to mitigate against your opponent doing the same.
Yeah, and my last point about Toad is don't sleep on a guaranteed incinerate. It's actually really powerful to just be able to
Mm-hmm.
incinerate a target. You might look at Toad and be like, you're not going to help me in this aggro game, but getting you an incinerate on Juggernaut or Dr. Voodoo is really, really impactful. And just a range 2, like it's a 5 dice attack. I don't really care about that, but it's range 2, cost me 2, and it incinerates you. That's a great attack.
Yeah, Toad can do surprising amounts of damage if he has power, right? Because he can hop to save himself needing to take a move action, double attack with the automatic incinerate. He's a really flexible piece.
Yeah, so I have Dr. Voodoo, Black Cat, and Toad in my list or roster. Pat, do you have them in the same?
I do. They're cool. They're all great. They work great together.
Yeah. So next up is Bullseye, just slightly less popular than Toad. Another 2 with really powerful affiliation stacked onto him. Obviously, he went through a character update there. Criminal Syndicate being a popular affiliation. Not surprised to see Bullseye, right? And Bullseye is the premier 2 threat damage dealer, I think. Would you agree with that, Pat?
Yeah, we can't call him the premier 2 threat, right? Because he's neck and neck with Toad. But I think Toad is this. We've said he's a good all-rounder, but he's primarily taken as an extract specialist, right?
Mhm.
And Bullseye is more like the damage focus all-rounder. He's that character that has most often replaced Okoye if you just need a value 2 threat without a specific plan. You just need someone to fill the points and you want them to be useful over the course of the game, then Bullseye is your man. Um, he's mobile with parting shot and hit and run. He has really good range 4 on all his attacks, and his damage output is incredibly consistent because he never misses, right? And that's so much value on a 2 threat character.
Yeah, he's good. He's just a good 2 threat, and I am often impressed by the amount of damage he's able to put out there. Right on his healthy side, it's often just like throwing knife, and I'm going to use parting shot if the things miss. You
Yep.
sprinkle a hit and run if the character needs to move somewhere. When you
Mm-hmm.
daze him, which is normally how he ends up kind of with the glut of power, because he does have a flat builder, so getting the 4 or 6 takes a little bit while. But pincushion is potential for a lot of damage. 5 dice with an automatic rapid strike. It's
Yeah. Ignores
yeah,
cover. It's very strong. Yeah, it's
absolutely.
deceptively powerful. One of the better damage dealing spenders in the game, right? It's significantly better than, for example, a 7 dice spender, which is a common thing, right? Um, so yeah, I think Bullseye is great. I really love how his chip damage adds up between I never miss, his bleeds, and his parting shot. He can just whittle people down. And he's so good in damage focused teams, just being mobile enough to pick his targets where he's doing guaranteed single points of damage where it matters to to take out characters or to put them in really precarious positions when combo with like crisis effects and that kind of thing.
So, any tips on dealing with the bullseye? He's one of those characters where I feel like you often have to overcommit, right? You're going to have to commit a 3 or 4 to him to take care of him, but that's usually what you do to try to get him off the board early.
Yeah. The things that I said about Toad with Slippery apply to Bullseye with Parting Shot, right? The rules aren't exactly the same, but the counterplay is the same, which is you want to try and avoid him using it to escape your attacks. So, any way to get that damage in or to get multiple attacks is going to be really helpful. I will say, though, that he is fragile. And I honestly think if Bullseye is a thorn in your side, the best thing you can do is just murder him because his
Yeah,
defensive stats are pretty lackluster, right?
4 stamina, 3-3-2.
Yeah, real bad. Um, so he's a character that's always useful, but the counterplay to him that's there and obvious. When I've been playing with Bullseye, he's really shone when he has been low enough down the totem pole in terms of threat that my opponent has just not wanted to commit to him, right? And the best way he can do that is by staying at long range. If you have long range characters yourself, then you can take out Bullseye very efficiently.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you're a cagey Bullseye player, if you want him to stick around, like don't be afraid to advance him off your rear D, right? Hit and run, make the throwing knife attack at range 4, and then move him back to that D, right? Keep him safe, just be a range proximity. And if they really want to commit vision or someone deep to get him, like you're probably okay with that, right?
Yeah. And when you're playing against him, remember that if you have a long range attack and he uses parting shot to escape a second attack, then he is also putting himself out of range to retaliate against you. And yeah, you might take a damage from parting shot, but also he won't get another chance to do an automatic damage to you the next turn. So that's kind of a wash, and it's another way that you can somewhat play around parting shot.
So I don't have anything I want to cover with Bullseye. I think he's a pretty straightforward character. I'm not saying that in a negative way. He's a very effective character, but uh, I think people have a good idea what he does. Anything you want to add on, Pat?
Yeah, I want to give you a hot take. I think Bullseye is overrated. I think
Ooh.
he's great. I've been playing him in basically all of my teams since he got improved, and he's been excellent, don't get me wrong. But the problem with Bullseye is because he's fragile and long range, he wants to be doing specific things on the crisis, right? He wants to be running away with extracts, and he wants to be sitting on secures that are out of harm's way,
Mhm.
like back secures, like your home points on Gamma, or the two infinity formulas that are nearest you, that kind of thing, right? And he's great at that, don't get me wrong. The reason I think he's overrated is a lot of teams have multiple characters in affiliation that do this job already, a lot of whom are all stars to their affiliation. And Bullseye often gets thrown in because he's generically good without considering that he's a lot less good when that job is already taken and he doesn't really have an opportunity to shine. So, for example, and this is an example I keep going back to, Guardians of the Galaxy, right? Guardians of the Galaxy basically never leave home without Star-Lord and Rocket. These are two characters that make good ranged attacks and want to be doing the same things as Bullseye. They want to be sitting near the back, firing their guns, running away with extracts, holding back secures. You're taking them no matter what. There is no crisis where a third character that does this is particularly useful. And this is the problem I have with Bullseye. He's generically good, but he can be redundant. And I think he's too popular because people are taking him in situations where he's actually not nearly as good as someone like a Koye, where you need a 2-threat to just go and stand in the middle of the table.
That makes a ton of sense. I don't know if I'd go with overrated, but maybe overtaken, which I guess could be overrated. I think identifying what you want your two threat to do is important because all of these two threats now are such negative. They're unitaskers, right? They're going to
Mm-hmm.
achieve one thing well,
Yep.
and make to your point, making Bullseye do something he's not built to do. You're just not going to get good results out of. If for some reason Bullseye's in the middle in Gamma, I feel like you've gone wrong here, right? That's not a situation where Bullseye wants to be.
Exactly. So there's a few teams that I think don't get as much use out of Bullseye. Oh, Bullseye is not at his best there, even though he looks like he should be great with them. Guardians, Avengers, especially with Sam Wilson, where Sam Wilson is basically doing the same thing as him. Um, and there's some other teams as well. I just encourage you, if you're playing Bullseye, take a long hard look at the other characters you're playing regularly and think, okay, how much is he overlapping with them? Because I do think he's taken at times where it's detrimental, and you'd be better off with a different 2-threat.
All right, so kind of rounding out this group here at 29% is Lizard, Mr. Curtis Connors. Kind of falls into the same group as Voodoo, Black Cat, and Toad, right? But just a slightly more fair version, right? Lizard is primarily taken as a scenario piece, right? You've mentioned it so many times, right? He's that piece that you're going to double media move into your opponent's side of the board, grab something, and ask them,
Mm-hmm.
can you take this off me?" And Dr. Voodoo and Black Cat will say yes, but a lot of other characters will say no, and that's kind of the crux of what Lizard does.
Yeah, he isn't doing any of the steel shenanigans, right? He's just combining being fast with being tough in a way that's really relevant in MCP. He does that job great. He also, of course, has good ways to spend his power if your answer to him is to damage him, right? It's really hard to kill him. And if you flip him, when he gets back up, he's got a great throw. He's got a great spender. So I really like Lizard. I think he's excellent at running between secures, throwing people off. He's excellent at grabbing extracts and running away with them. and he can fight if he has to. He's excellent in any affiliation that can give him extra power so that he can be more proactive rather than kind of hoping your opponent interacts with him in order to generate power. But yeah, I've been really happy with Lizard in basically any home. As long as he's running forward and grabbing an extract or sitting on a secure, thumbs up.
I think he falls, and I don't think he's overrated, but I think he falls into the Bullseye category a little bit, where Lizard's going to do one thing really well. Don't try to make him do other things, right? He wants to grab stuff and not die. But at the same time, like, it's MCP, you can't stick him in the middle of your opponent's team and expect him to live, right? He's going to be one of those characters that's really annoying to deal with on a flank or something.
Yeah, I do think there's a couple of. I agree with what you said, but I think there's a couple of exceptions to your rule. Because I think in teams like Brotherhood, you can give him enough power that he can
Mhm.
become a fighting character if he has to be. And he has a really interesting team tactics card, Monkey Brain is Lizard Home, which is becoming increasingly popular because it gives him an area effect guaranteed push. And in the right crisis, I mean, if he is standing in the middle of the enemy team and he's alive, that area effect push can be huge, right? In particular on Gamma. There's quite a few teams right now playing Lizard with this card because they plan to take him on Gamma. And he can have a really, really impactful turn when he uses this in the right circumstance.
But again, I think that goes back to, right, you take Lizard to put him in certain circumstances where he can kind of shine, right?
Yes.
And Lizard, even without Monkey Brain, isn't horrible on Gamma, especially in Brotherhood or somewhere where you're giving him the power, right? Because he's able to move up there. He's got a wild push, I think.
Yep.
Right? He's got a wild push on his builder, and he's got a size 3 throw, right? Yeah,
Yep.
and a character throw, size 3. Yeah, he can do just fine on Gamma, but there's just a lot of situations where, yeah, he's just gonna be fine.
Yeah, I have to say though, I don't think there's a crisis combo in the game where I wouldn't be happy to play Lizard. I do think he
Ooh.
shines in some more than others. Like he's not at his best on the single high priority extracts that you roll to find, right? Like alien ships, senators. He's not at his best there, but even those he's fine. And basically every other crisis he's really good on. So it doesn't surprise me how popular Lizard is.
Hmm. I'd have to think about it. I mean, I think first I judge him based off the extracts, and then we can kind of roll over to the other ones. Uh, yeah, I mean, there's like, I don't love him on Mystical Con and Herb, right? I don't think I'm wrong there. I mean, if your plan's just to have him durably move across the middle of the field,
Yeah, that's fair. But even in Wakanda Herb, right, he can be your character that guards your herb and pushes other people off it.
yeah, I just think there are better characters to do it. I also don't love him in Montesi, but I feel like we're kind of splitting hairs here.
You're right. One thing I point out with all of these things we've named is they're all extracts. He's great on basically every secure, and you're always playing a secure. Maybe not demons. Maybe if you're playing demons plus one of the extracts we mentioned, maybe that's the one time Lizard doesn't come out of your tent. But I think that's why he's so popular. Is he's just useful in so many situations.
Yeah, I don't like him on demons, right? I don't like him on Terrigen Clouds personally. I really don't want my lizard poisoned. But again, I feel like we're kind of cutting hairs here. He's good into most of the field, right?
Right. So, because it's so hard to damage him, I think, although obviously just attacking him can be a valid counterplay like it can be with anyone in MCP, I think in general, plans that just involve attacking him are not really the best thing to do. Has that been your experience?
Yeah, I mean, he's a more durable Iron Man, right? He's 4 physical defense, 3/3 with the damage reduction tacked onto him. He's not a character I want to beat through because he's 6 stamina.
Right. And you already mentioned that characters like who steal, so like Black Cat, Voodoo, Miles, Enchantress, are a good way of working around that. What other counterplay is there?
Similar to Black Cat, he is susceptible to quite a few different status effects that I think could be super relevant. If you do want to beat him down, Incinerate kind of goes a long way. If we can slow him, that helps control him. If we can poison or even root, honestly makes his throw kind of annoying. But I
Mm.
really just want to control him either through pushes or throws, and just please stand over there. Don't get to something relevant. What are you doing, Pat?
Yeah, I agree. I think actually one of the things that you want to do with Lizard more often than most characters is just ignore him. in
Mm.
that if he is just carrying an extract or sitting on a secure, I mean, that is good and it's important, but you know what? There's probably other characters doing the same things on other parts of the table, and they are probably much easier to hurt for their threat value, right? They're probably higher priority than him. He is a really low priority for dealing with. And so I'm happy to let him just like run off with his extract if I can focus my damage on someone else who is going to be taken out more easily, and it's going to be a bigger reward for doing so.
Yeah, I think that's a great shout out there. So, um, yeah, really good character though. I love Lizard. So
Yeah, he's really cool.
I think we probably just have time to cover one or two other characters. And the next character is an interesting one, so I definitely want to cover them. The next one is Juggernaut, who's down at 25%. And Juggernaut is taken here for a few reasons. A, the character's new. B, the character is in the most popular affiliation right now, Brotherhood, right?
Yeah,
Um, and C, he is a ton of fun to play. It's just
super fun.
it's very evocative feel. I love playing Juggernaut. I'm a little sad he's not in my current roster. Um, we did a whole episode on Juggernaut. I encourage you to check that out if you want to hear us kind of go into a deep dive of him. But Juggernaut is obviously very good at he is super, super mobile
Mm-hmm.
and he hits one thing really hard every round, right?
Yep.
So
He-
he's just a good character, right? It's just a solid 5 threat, opens up a bunch of list building opportunities for Brotherhood coming in affiliated, and then Criminal Syndicate, he's basically a staple in now, I feel.
right. He's really fast. He's really tough, and he hits quite hard for his threat value. He's not a pure damage piece, but the one big swing with 8 dice is great. And if that doesn't finish them off, maybe ramming into them for an extra point will. Um, so yeah, he's very, very good. You can take him as a generic good character, and I think Brotherhood do that right as like an anchor for your team. Or you can take him as a crisis specialist, where he is particularly good on certain crises. For example, he's really good at ferrying the Wakandan herb from one side of the table to the other without being messed with, um, and really quickly because of his ability to push multiple times in a turn. So I think he's popular for a reason. He's new, he's powerful, he's fun, and he's versatile, either as a generalist or with specific plans.
So I don't think we need to go too in depth as to what Juggernaut's good at, right? I think we kind of covered
Mm-hmm.
that in our episode. Let's take a few minutes and talk about counterplay. We already talked about it, right? Cat and Voodoo taking things off him, very powerful. We don't
Yep.
really need to cover that anymore, do we?
No. And it's worth noting Voodoo has a little bit of a harder time because Voodoo struggles to generate good power into him with his 5 Mystic and he's 5 Threat. But even so, yeah, they're good answers.
Yeah, and then Voodoo's always interesting too because if Voodoo's in range to possess, then Juggernaut just like punches them for 8 dice. You're like, this is an interesting decision I have to make here.
Yeah, it's
Juggernaut's also
maybe
just
not
a
ideal.
really good control piece, right? We love his tactics card, right? He's just wild pushing his builder. He's just a good piece.
Mm-hmm.
So the first thing I want to say about Juggernaut is he's not unstoppable. You can attack him and he will go down. I know
Yep.
this is shocking. He's not that much more durable than Lizard, and he costs
Mm-hmm.
2 threat more. So
Yes.
I think that's an important thing to point out. I see so many people like, I can't possibly stop him. Like, you can though. It just is gonna take some time.
Yes, absolutely. And I think that's one of the better ways to handle him, honestly, is just put damage into him, even if you don't take him out in a single round, right? If you take him out over a course of 2 rounds, that can be plenty to deal with him. And especially true if you've got Mystic attackers on your team. Once he's flipped, it can be easier then to KO him for good. Um, so I think that plan works really well, especially if you have good energy attacks, with energy being his lowest defense on his healthy side. And I like the fact that as the person attacking him, every time I spike high into him, it feels really good. Even if I only do chip damage, the fact he's spending power to reduce my damage means I'm making some sort of progress, right? I'm reducing his output in the next turn, even if I'm not killing him. So I totally agree with you, TT. I think beating up Juggernaut is very viable.
And let me be clear, Juggernaut's a great piece, a well-designed piece. I love Juggernaut. His ability to use the power you give him to punish you is not as high as like Scarlet Witch or
No.
these other damage focused fives. Like I'm the Juggernaut's a great spender, but it's a 7 dice spender with a he's with a wild move after it, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So because he gets extra dice for moving, he's usually only making a single attack action, and it's either an 8 dice builder or a 10 dice spender, and that's it. So yeah, he does not convert power into damage very well at all. He does convert it into survivability and into speed. So you got to be careful about fueling him up so that he can then stand up, pick up the senator, and just fly away, right? But I agree that damaging him works nicely. He's pretty resilient to conditions. He's immune to stun. He can reduce stagger. He doesn't care about slow because he's already a slow mover. But incinerate and poison are mildly useful against him. Having said that, though, I think if you would compare him to other characters in general, conditions aren't really the way to go because so many of them have a pretty minor effect against him. Even shock doesn't matter that much when you're rolling a single attack with loads of dice.
Yeah, I do want to hit on the stagger real quickly because a lot of people just ignore it completely. And Black Cat's an interesting one that can stagger with a controlled amount of damage in, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the way he gets rid of the stagger is by Nothing Stops the Juggernaut, which costs 3 power to use. If you can make him take the move action first, which generates power, then the stagger has worked, right? Because before you take your first action has to be to shake the stagger. So stagger can work in the Juggernaut as long as Juggernaut doesn't have 3 power.
Yes, pretty situational, but really important to keep in mind for sure.
Yeah. Any other tips for dealing with him? Otherwise, like the throwing him away with a character that can is super relevant. I know this is it sounds weird, but I almost treat him the same way I treat Lizard sometimes. I'm like, Juggernaut, please stop. I get you're gonna punch someone real hard every activation, but I'm just gonna throw you over there with Hulk, let's say. Hulk's gonna punch on these people over here. Juggernaut's gonna come back, punch Hulk. Hulk's gonna be upset, and then Hulk's just gonna rinse and repeat.
Yeah, absolutely. I do think that he plays a lot like a 5-threat Lizard, and you absolutely can ignore him as long as he's not scoring too many victory points. I also agree with you that he's resistant to so much control, but the control that you can have against him is really powerful. So most superpowers don't work, and he's size 4, so most throws don't work. But those throws that can throw him, oh, they're so good. And it's really useful to look at your team and say, okay, what pushes and what throws do I have available that will actually control Juggernaut?
Yeah, and that could be 2 ways, right? We could throw Juggernaut away just because we don't want to deal with him, or the same way you punished old MODOK, right? Where you're just throwing Juggernaut into his teammates and being like, yeah, I don't know, there's 5 damage.
Yes.
Yeah.
Can work great. Can work really, really well. So I think size 4 throws in general have gone up in value a lot with the proliferation of Juggernaut and also the increase in popularity of Hulk. I think size 4 throws are very, very good and worth looking at for any squad.
The last thing I want to mention when you're playing against Juggernaut is be careful when you're dazing him because he picks up Avatar of Cyttorak on his injured side. So a couple different things happen. His Mystic Defense drops because he lost his helmet, but he picks up a very relevant throw where now he's throwing characters and terrain, right? Size 3 medium. So just be aware that on his dazed side, his injured side, he does change slightly. And that throw can catch some people unaware.
Yes, and indeed he can more easily convert power into damage once that's online.
All right, Pat. I think that brings us to time there, Pat. You know, we covered Dr. Voodoo, Black Cat, Toad, Bullseye, Lizard, and Juggernaut. I think that's a great primer here of characters to start with. I think, Pat, in the ACS, how about we each pick one more character we're excited about and we kind of dive into that?
Yeah, sounds good. I'm looking forward. I have in mind someone already.
All right. So if you don't know what the ACS is, it stands for the after the credit scene. See, we stole that from the Marvel movies. Get it? Marvel Crisis Protocol, Marvel movies. It's something we offer to our patrons. You can check that out at patreon.com/across the Bifrost. You get a 15 to 30 minute bonus episode every week. We also want to encourage you to check out the Discord. acrossthebifrost.com/Discord, YouTube channel, youtube.com/across the Bifrost. That's it. I'm done plugging things. We want to thank you so much for listening, regardless of whether you're supporting us or not, And until next time, everyone, cheers and happy gaming.